Witness me! Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, the fifth film installment within the Mad Max franchise, and serves as both a direct sequel to Mad Max Fury Road as well as a spin-off of the Furiosa character as made famous by Charlize Theron. So going into Furiosa, for this film to be successful, I had three questions going into this new installment of the Mad Max franchise. The first one, would I notice the absence of Charlize Theron and learn to embrace Anya Taylor Joy in the role of Furiosa? Going into this movie, I was certainly a skeptic. One, I was not the biggest fan of Mad Max Fury Road. To be honest, I kind of find that film a bit overrated. Incredible action. I find the story to be very paper thin and just wasn't rewarding to watch unfold. And I also had this worry of we were taking the most popular character from Fury Road, popularized by Charlize Theron, and now replacing her with a younger actress who didn't quite have the star power of a Charlize, and putting her in this world as a prequel spin-off story, and now asking her to succeed in this despite everyone associating that role with the more iconic actor in Charlize Theron. If this sounds familiar, it's because this is what just happened with Solo, a Star Wars story, and the Lightyear movie from Pixar. So I was skeptical going into Furiosa. Charlize Theron is undeniable in this role, and replacing her just seemed like a tall task, and I didn't think it was going to pay off. So going into this movie, George Miller had to prove that it would work. Speaking of George Miller, my second question was, can George Miller once again reinvent the wheel, or is Furiosa doomed to exist within Fury Road's shadow? And three, and it kind of just goes into that point I just brought, what can Furiosa offer me as a viewer who was lukewarm on Fury Road? Was this going to be more of the same, essentially? And that's what I want to talk about today in my review of Furiosa. And for those who do not know, the story of Furiosa takes place across 2 decades and tells the origin story of Furiosa, who as a young girl is kidnapped by a man known as Dr. Dementus, the warlord of an apocalyptic biker gang. He's portrayed by Chris Hemsworth. As Furiosa works her way up from slavery to trusted lieutenant of Immortal Joe's cult, one thing grounds her: her desire to enact her revenge on Dementus in this 160 million plus apocalyptic action adventure from Warner Brothers Studio. So let's just start with this first question. Again, would I notice the absence of Charlize Theron and learn to embrace Anya Taylor Joy in the role of Furiosa? My answer to this question was actually answered very quickly within the first 75 minutes of this 2.5 hour epic. And the reason I was able to buy into Anya Taylor Joy taking over the role from Charlize was the pacing of this film allows me to gradually lean into Anya Taylor Joy's performance in this film. We spend the first 75 minutes of this film basically circumnavigating this issue by first allowing Furiosa to be played by a child portrayed by Alyla Brown, and it essentially allows us to transition far easier into Anya Taylor Joy. There's some really good CGI or just eye work done to basically make Anya Taylor Joy and Alyla Brown look far more alike. And from my understanding, George Miller did some CGI effects on the eyes of Alyla Brown, so it allowed for this transition to feel far more normal, and it also just didn't just give Anya the struggle that a lot of films do, where we just start the movie with her and I'm watching the movie. I'm just like, well, that's not Charlize. Feels off. Like, why are we doing this? Why isn't Charlize in this role? Starting her off as the child and then allowing her to get progressively older as the film progresses into its 15-20 year span, and then getting us to the point of Charlize Theron, it felt far more of an easy acceptance getting into this, and that allows Anya to take the screen with far less pressure on her as an actress now, as she is navigating more from the role of Alyla Brown growing up and less of replacing Charlize Theron. It allowed this performance to kind of stand on its own in a way that I didn't think this performance was going to be able to do going into this movie. And it's also based on the strength of Anya Taylor Joy as a performer in this movie. I think she is very well utilized in this movie. There is this otherworldly presence and screen captivation that Anya Taylor Joy is able to capture as a screen actor in this movie, and it allows that character to not have a lot of dialogue, but for that character to feel and express in ways that the emotion of the audience is able to understand. I think it's a quite captivating performance from Anya Taylor Joy in that way. And then with that, you then can start going into this. And the reason I think Furiosa works so well as a character is due to this relationship that she has with the character of Dementus, her kidnapper. This is the most fascinating part of this movie, and their true dynamic works wonders, which is now going to pivot me to the second question I had on this movie. Can George Miller once again reinvent the wheel, or is Furiosa doomed to exist within Fury Road's shadow? And the answer is the reinvention of this franchise is found within the film's villain, Dementus, as portrayed by Chris Hemsworth in Furiosa. This is the reason this film works to large degrees. And spoiler alert, I love Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. I thought this film was epic in all the right ways, and it is specifically due to the second question I had of this idea: can George Miller once again reinvent the wheel? And what it is it's this performance of Chris Hemsworth paired with what Anya Taylor Joy is bringing as an actress in it. And what Chris Hemsworth brings in his portrayal of the villain Dementus is fascinating, especially as it is so in line with what Anya Taylor Joy is doing. And it's just these two weird souls kind of interlocked in this war going on through decades. And what Hemsworth does in this role is there's an otherworldly charisma found within Dementus that feels radically different in tone than anything else within the franchise. Chris Hemsworth is at times doing a very comedic and over-the-top performance, but it never takes away from the demented element of his portrayal. He is very scary. He is very dangerous. He is able to utilize the charisma and charm that Chris Hemsworth has been so well known for. And this humoristic, charismatic approach to the character of Dementus grounds this world in a real way that I don't think this franchise has really ever had in this apocalyptic setting, whereas every other character is this weird desert freak, Dementus feels pre-apocalyptic in his demeanor to some degrees. It feels like this is someone who at one point got to experience a normal life and had that taken away from him. And how does he approach to his new world? And how does that drive him crazy? But also, he was at one point not of this world, and thus he kind of feels like this creature that just sticks out like a sore thumb in this apocalyptic world. And it just makes this performance and this demeanor that he brings scary, dangerous, tangible, and personal in a way that I just found radically shifts the world previously established and makes the apocalyptics feel earthly. And because I never really thought about it, obviously I knew Mad Max took place in Australia. I understood all that. I understand that this was supposed to be a story on Earth, but it does also feel kind of detached in the way that it is just this film of everything going on, and you kind of forget that this at some point was a normal world. And Dementus's performance, along with this brilliant opening scene that George Miller directs, it gives this world dimension in who thrives and who survives and what happened is essentially to get to these moments. And it felt far more rewarding in a way that we didn't actually have to see the world fall. We just got to know that there was this world that exists. And as time goes by, the remnants of it maybe still exist in some ways, and history plays a big part into this Furiosa movie, specifically with this historian who doubles as the narrator of this film. But Dementus is all rooted in this, essentially someone who can dictate his own mythology, his own history, his own approach, and gain power in this way. It's quite a fascinating portrayal portrayed by Chris Hemsworth in the Dementus role, and that relationship that he has with Anya Taylor Joy as Furiosa in this movie. You just feel this kind of dance going on throughout the film, especially because Furiosa is so human in her act and seeking of revenge. And in these themes of revenge, survival, this film feels smaller in scope, and it allows the real world to feel personified, allowing for characters' mythology to be established in front of our eyes instead of being found as is, where I feel like that is a lot of the Mad Max story. Again, I know obviously the first Mad Max follows Max essentially getting revenge himself, and I think in many ways that this film echoes closest to, but essentially while watching this film, I felt like Furiosa was essentially watching the radicalization of humanity at this point of time. And that to me was exciting because that was a theme and approach to this film that I hadn't seen in any of the other Mad Max films. Maybe some scholars would disagree and say that that is the thematic core of these Mad Max movies. I felt it to be really true in this movie, which brings me to my third and final question. What can Furiosa offer me as a viewer who was lukewarm on Fury Road? And to be honest, this film kind of offered me everything. Essentially, it allowed me an entryway into the wasteland of Mad Max. It allowed me to kind of get transported into this world with a story that I found more universal in revenge and power. The tagline of this film, Fury is Born, you really do feel that mythology coming to life and seeing this character exist. And they do some of the prequel elements where it's just like, how did Furiosa get this way? Or how did she meet these characters? Like, it does that in elements, but that's not really what the idea is. It really is to explain how this person we found in Fury Road became this soul that has this level of anger and determination. How does someone's psyche break to a point to become this great of a warrior? And the psyche of watching someone essentially be forcefully indoctrinated into this hellscape is really rewarding to watch. And obviously from that point on, George Miller is such an incredible director of action set pieces and just incredible CGI and practical effects. And just at that point, the tangibility of the world becomes so real to me that the story and the visual language of this film becomes so fully realized to me, and it becomes so much more rewarding for me as a viewer. It's just such a special gift that he has as a director, and in this movie, it is just a craftsmanship's delight, and I delighted in watching him do this with a script that I deemed better than Fury Road. Some people are going to find that controversial. I don't care. I loved Furiosa, and it was, for me, far more emotionally resonant than I was expecting it to. And everything of this film really works. I like how the film takes its time. I like the film's length. I like how it kind of feels stagnant and really puts the audience in a tone and feel to this world. And from where these characters go, this Chris Hemsworth performance at the front and center, who he is essentially the star of this movie in Furiosa's movie, essentially the same way that Furiosa was the star of Mad Max, despite it being quite literally titled Mad Max Fury Road. Dementus kind of works in this because to me, he is the most captivating performance and character in this world, but that doesn't take away anything from the Furiosa character. Some of the naysayers for this film will kind of say that that element of Dementus being so locked in as a character and Furiosa in some ways taking a backseat, that is kind of going up against this incredible feminist hero that George Miller crafts in Fury Road. But I don't think that ever comes to the expense of Furiosa, because I think this challenge of this film was, how do we get the audience to care about a character that they already know and already know the outcome of where this character ends up in? And I think this film being so centric in its revenge and watching this character age and become war ready is the meat and potatoes of this movie. And it just really locked me in from beginning, and I was hooked on to the end, which is one of the most, I don't even know how to describe the ending of this film, but for the last hour I was locked in, and specifically the last 10 minutes of this movie, it was the only way that I could ever want this movie to end. And it's wicked. It's wicked how this movie ends, and I love it for it. Like, that is the appeal of this movie. So Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, can highly recommend that you check it out in theaters. See it in theaters. It deserves to be seen on the biggest screen with the loudest sound possible. And I had a great time watching this movie, and I can't wait to see it again. And you know what? With that all, maybe I have to give Fury Road another chance. I've only seen it, I think, the one time in theater, so maybe it is time due for a rewatch. With that all said, Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, I'm giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars.